The Secrets of Technology is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Technology. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Technology, where we discuss the technology news that's important to you from a uniquely Catholic point of view. And joining me today on the panel are Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hi, Dom.
And Jack Baruzzini. Hey, Jack.
Hey, Dom.
Before we get into our topics today, I want to tell you all about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/secrets. So before we get into talking about our main topic, we have a little bit of feedback I want to share. We got an email from listener Ted, who writes, after listening to episode 205, it is apparent that deepfakes are going to be a big problem. We're seeing a lot of these fakes, and they're getting better and better. Do you foresee any legislation or repercussions for posting these materials if it's deemed that they're malicious? Maybe there are laws in place, but how do they enforce them? Maybe the same team that enforces the do not call list can assist. I think that was sarcasm at the end there.
I was about to say.
Yeah, we do have actually a headline we're going to talk about later about a deep fake photography sort of thing going on, which is, some people might deem deceptive. But in general, like, as these things become more prevalent, I mean, do we need special laws to cover them? What do you guys think?
It's the problem that always comes with legislating technology is the technology is going to advance way quicker than any sort of laws we write about it can, because I think we're about 90% of the way from deep fakes being completely indistinguishable from real life. And once you get there, like, I don't think you're going to be able to tell. Like, maybe algorithmically there's some way, but that's still going to be on the side of the technology and not the legislation. So I think, as with all things, people just need to be educated and not just believe whatever they read on the internet. That's already an issue, and this is just going to make it worse.
Yeah. You should never believe any video you see on the internet, because even if it's not a deep fake, it's been selectively edited. It's lacking context. So, I mean, if you ever see a video of anything, consider the source, treat it like a grain of salt. Deep fakes there won't be any legislation or laws about them until they embarrass the wrong people. And then, there will be probably criminal charges brought against the funny person who posted the meme, right, that embarrassed the wrong person. So, I mean, I think you'll see onesie, twosie, things like that, but there's never been really any technology that's been slowed down or stopped by laws, that's this accessible and this out there.
Right. I think fraud is still fraud, and libel and all that sort of stuff is still it is what it. Like, I don't think you need new laws to cover it. It's just you coming up with new ways to commit the same old crimes. So
right.
So in that, I mean, the lawmakers will grandstand about it. We should ban TikTok and which may or may not be a good idea. I'm not in favor of TikTok in general, but lawmakers are getting in on the grandstanding of all this regardless. So, which is to say, I don't think we're going to get laws will get passed. I don't think they'll be effective, like you guys say. So I don't think this is going to be about people, and maybe we just get to a point where it's so good where we really are forced to be skeptical more than we are, and that's just the way it is.
I hope that's where it goes. I have a feeling it's going to go the opposite direction, and this is like AI is an amazing propaganda tool, and that's my big worry about it.
Right.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, we're in the golden age of AI where it's still hilarious. There's entire channels on YouTube that are devoted just to recreating Joe Rogan podcasts where he talks to Jordan Peterson about their favorite Lego sets, and they go deep into Lego lore, and it's all, deep faked voices and stuff. And it's really funny. And one of my favorite YouTube channels is a Scottish comedian named Charlie Hopkinson, where he does he doesn't have to fake the voices. He does spot on impressions. So I guess impressionists need to be worried about this, but of, Ewan McGregor, Liam Neeson, Sir Ian McKellen, and just deep fakes their faces on them. And so it's like they're all hanging out in their flat watching the latest, episode of Mandalorian or whatever.
Love that
and riffing it as they watch it. And so I think we're still at the point where AI is a novelty. It's fun. It's funny. Enjoy this moment. Because it may never come again.
Yeah,
right. Someone does a deep fake Tom Cruise, and that was a good one. And then also a deep fake George Lucas is another one that's out there.
Yeah, that's another.
So I don't know what we could do about it. I mean, the technology will happen. I mean, you just can't prevent the advancement of the technology. So we have to figure out how to deal with it as best we can. So with that happy thought, let us move on to something that will make us happy by, instead of looking forward at technology, let's look back at some technology. We're going to talk about the whole world of handheld retro gaming. And so and I've got the two guys here to talk about it who know more about it than I do, because the first question is what is handheld retro gaming and what's the deal? Like, why is this a big deal? Jack, why don't I let you go first?
So essentially what it is, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's playing retro games on handheld devices. And over the past 2 or 3 years, this scene has really exploded. Like, you've always been able to, I know people have always like collected old Game Boys, or like with the PSP done different things where they can root them and play different games on them. But there are a lot of really affordable, pretty easy barrier of entry handhelds that you can get now. There's companies like Ambernick makes a bunch of them that are really cool. Powkitty makes some really affordable ones. And the fun thing about it is that retro games, they don't take up a lot of processing power. So the devices don't need to be particularly powerful. And the emulators, which is basically the simulated software that runs on these devices, that runs different systems, is getting really good. It's a very good project for open source. And I think a lot of the appeal of it is that, I mean, a lot of it is nostalgia. The people who played these games as kids now have the expendable income to buy these devices and play these games. But I also think there's an attraction to it for people who are younger, because a lot of the games that like were made for like the Nintendo or Super Nintendo, or like the Commodore 64 for that matter, they couldn't rely on flashy graphics as much as good gameplay. And so they have a lot more replayability than a lot of newer games.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a lot of the appeal is kind of you're mining the past to a certain extent. There's still, as I grew up in the golden age of arcades, my parents would take me to arcades when I was, 4 and 5. It's where I wanted to be. If I, could have lived in a video arcade, I probably would have. And there's still games that I haven't heard of that you'll come across and you'll try it. And back in this era, like, games weren't made by teams of 20, 60, 200 people. They were made by teams of maybe 3 people. Like you would have someone to do graphics, programming, and maybe a sound person, and sometimes the programming person was the graphics person and the sound person was the person designing the game. So they're a lot more personal, because with the smaller teams, there's a lot more of that kind of personal stamp on them. It hasn't been designed by a committee or put out by a corporation, and plus they're just fun to pick up and play. Retro arcade games were meant to be played for 90 seconds, and then you would either continue or go away and do something else. And so just when you have 2 minutes, you can pull something out, play it for 90 seconds, and say, okay, I played a video game. But, you get into Super Nintendo and PlayStation on handhelds, and you do get RPGs, role-playing games that can be, 40 or 80 hours. And, those can be fun. Now with modern conveniences like save states, which is the ability to save any game at any point and come back to it. The emulator software just says, okay, here's everything that's in my memory. Boom, you can pick it up like you never left. It does make it a lot easier to play some of those games where, you might not have been able to save as often as you wanted. Still trying to find the typewriter ribbons in the first Resident Evil, which let you save the game. Very limited supply.
So what defines a retro game? Is it just age? Or is it technology? Like if it was 16-bit or 8-bit, or, I mean, what makes a retro game?
I think it's going to depend on who you ask. So like, I know for me, my definition of retro game might be different from yours, Victor. Because like when I grew up, we had a Super Nintendo, and that was kind of the last generation, but you could still get it. And then all the new games were like PlayStation 2 and GameCube. That was like the new stuff that we were never able to get, unfortunately. I've remedied that now as an adult. But I would say, to me, retro games is anything before like the year 2000. I feel like that's kind of the cutoff, although we're getting remakes of games that were made for the PlayStation 2 or like even old PC games. Like they just remade Dead Space, and I saw someone refer to the original one, which came out in 2008, as a retro game.
No.
And I really wouldn't consider that retro.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
Green Day is classic rock now. Huh?
A very young person probably said that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think of like, for me, like Apple II games would be retro games if I were to encounter those today, or even like early, like I would think of the original Marathon as a retro game. That's sort of the predecessor to Halo, you know. I think of those games, and that really takes me back. So yeah.
And for me, it's not just about age, because you know, if we're going by age, I might say up through, you know, the GameCube, just because that was, you know, the system where I really, you know, came into adulthood or something, right? It's you can draw the line wherever you want, but there are still people out there actually making games that run on Sega Genesis hardware or Nintendo Entertainment System hardware, and I would consider those retro games. They're new games that are made to run on you know, old hardware, and we'll talk about you know, one of my favorite legal ways to play retro games and how that's kind of you know, carrying the torch forward there. But yeah, I would say it's a function of, you know, age, which systems, but also, I mean, you know, you look at a game like you know, Shovel Knight, which has a very NES aesthetic. It's a modern game. There's lots of modern conveniences, but you know, to some people they would consider that a retro game.
So why handheld specifically? I assume that like you could play retro games on PCs and laptops, but what's the appeal with handheld?
Well, at least for me, it's the nostalgia of playing like Game Boy games in a Game Boy form factor. You can play those on any emulator on your computer, and it's pretty easy to set up, but then you have to get a controller and you're using a big screen, and there's a lot of like tricks you can do with shaders and resolutions and stuff to make it look better, but I just feel like they fit better on the format they were made for. And another thing is portability. Like I got the Steam Deck, and that's really the first time I've played games since I've had kids, because when you have kids, you can't really sit down at your computer and play games. But when I rock the newborn at night, I can just pull out my Steam Deck and play while she falls asleep.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's up until this point, handhelds haven't been like powerful enough to play. You know, we see this with the Switch and the Steam Deck, and even the you know, the less expensive retro machines that are running like, you know, mobile processors that are, you know, quad core or whatever, Snapdragon or Allwin or whatever they are. But they're powerful enough now that they can play, you know, up through PlayStation 1 or Dreamcast games. And so I think part of it is just the ability to play a Dreamcast game in the palm of your hand. You know, this would have been like mind blowing, you know, as a kid. I mean, when the Game Boy came out, and then the Atari Lynx, and the Atari Lynx is the one I had. It was, you know, full color, you know, sprite scaling, played arcade games, you know, sampled sound and everything. And it was just mind blowing that you could hold something like this in the palm of your hand when you used to need like a TV and all these cables and everything. So part of it is just, it's just really cool for, you know, someone who grew up with, you know, tethered to the TV or in the arcades to just say, now I can have like 100 games on the go. But also it suits it very well to the, you know, older games, especially arcade games. You play them for shorter periods of time. And like I said, again, with save states, you know, you can pull it out, play for a few minutes, and then put it down, and you don't feel like I have to keep going until I get to the next, you know, save spot.
Cool. Well, let's get into talking about some of the specifics of these handheld retro games. So Victor, you mentioned the good legal ways to play, so we should probably start with that.
And again, you know, I mean, it's playing, when you get into, you know, retro games and emulators, you have to tread carefully, because you know, it is a legal gray area. Depending on who you ask. For other people, it's black and white. I prefer to do things the legal way if I want to make sure that, if I can, you know, make sure the developers of the game get the money somehow. It's maybe a little bit different if something is out of print, has been out of print for 20 years and is never coming back into print. But there are two ways that I play retro games mostly nowadays, and this is just kind of where I've gravitated to. And the first is on the go, and the first is the Nintendo Switch. And the Nintendo Switch, like any modern console, has a eShop where you can digitally purchase software, and there's a number of older arcade games on there that you can purchase. There's compilations of Capcom or SNK arcade games that you can buy. There's also, Nintendo has their own subscription service, which is an annual subscription service, and they have on offer there a number of NES, SNES, Nintendo 64, Sega Genesis games that you can play depending on which level of the subscription you purchase. And so that's a lot of fun. It's updated with network play, so you can play your 4-player Mario Kart 64 with people who aren't in the room with you, which is fun. So that's one way that I enjoy. And the other is, I've mentioned this very early on in the podcast, so probably about a year or so ago, is the Evercade. And Evercade is a product that is based out of the UK, I believe, and their kind of ethos has been to license retro games, whether it was for 8-bit systems, 16-bit systems, arcade systems, compile a whole bunch of them onto a cartridge, sell the cartridge for $20 or so, and then they make their own hardware, which was a handheld, and then they came out with like a console, and then they have a new handheld which just came out, and it's very good. It's leaps and bounds above their first console, and that's the Evercade EXP. And it connects to your TV. It has a really nice screen. It has a whole bunch of Capcom arcade games built in, and then comes with another cartridge of arcade games and plays all of the other cartridges. And I really like that, because I really like collecting cartridges. They all come in cool plastic clamshell boxes. The cartridges have art. They have manuals with instructions in them. And what I like about it is that it is a curated experience. And they're not limited to just, games that came out in the 80s or 90s. They're releasing new compilations of indie games. So these are games that people programmed for Game Boy recently, or Nintendo or the 16-bit consoles. And they'll bundle those up and put them on a cartridge, and you can kind of see what new games are like on these old systems. And so I really like the new Evercade EXP. And it's a lot of fun, and completely legal, and the developers, to the extent that it's possible, get a little money at least.
Cool. How about you, Jack? What is it that how you like to do retro gaming?
I primarily use the Steam Deck, and there's this really good program called EmuDeck, which is an emulator for the Steam Deck. Because the Steam Deck is basically just a Linux computer in a handheld format, so you can play Steam games on it, but it has a full desktop. And if you just go to EmuDeck, you can download the installer. It installs all the different emulators for you. It's a really easy setup. It walks you through everything, and then you just put your ROMs in the ROM folder, and it even will go through and scan to make sure that they're actual functional ROMs and everything is integrated the way it should be. And it gives you like a whole front end. You can navigate through all your games. And that's the primary way I play. I play like mostly NES or SNES games on it. But it's quick and easy. It's a lot easier even than like a couple of years ago when I was using some like the older Anbernic handhelds. You don't have to like compile the whole operating system and do all these different tricks to get it working. It's pretty much plug and play. And the nice thing is, because it's on a more powerful device, you can use different shaders that will basically change how the screen will look. Like if you want it to look more retro, it does things like pixel stretching, so you can get like widescreen NES games, which is a lot of fun. That's the primary way I do it. I also have a Powkitty, I think it's called the V90, and it's essentially like a little Linux. Here, I'm showing it on the screen for the audio people. It looks just like a Nintendo or a Game Boy Advance SP, and it's perfect for playing anything that's Game Boy or Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance. And it's the same thing. It's a Linux-based machine, and you just put the ROMs on the card, and it's ready to go.
Cool. Yeah, I love the fact that these new, the Switch, the Steam Deck, they can play these new awesome super graphic games, and yet you can also just load them up with all this all the classics, all the retro stuff, and go to town on it. I love the flexibility that they offer. Apple would never do this. Like, this is not an Apple sort of thing that you would do. These sorts of companies are going to do that because, well, Nintendo, because they have the huge IP library of Nintendo games, and Steam Deck because Valve kind of has that, Linux Rebel ethos, I think, behind them. So it's really kind of cool.
It's funny. I got the Steam Deck and I was excited because I could finally play all these games that I own that I never had a computer powerful enough to. And 90% of what I play is either Vampire Survivors, which is a newer game, but it's a retro style roguelike RPG game, or old Nintendo games. So I'm not even taking advantage of like the full power of the machine.
That's funny. I have my eye on a Steam Deck, and I kind of want to get it to play the new games because I'm a Mac guy. I can't play that stuff, but yet, if I could find Castle Wolfenstein to play it on a Steam Deck, I would totally spend a lot of time doing that. Yep. Cool. What else, Victor? What else do we got for?
Yeah. So I have tried a number of, retro game machines and kind of decreasing order of legitimacy here. One thing that you can do is, you mentioned having a Steam Deck, which is a Linux retro gaming machine. If you have an old laptop lying around, and this is, anything made within the last 10 years or so, 10 or 12 years, you can install a very light Linux operating system on it. You can either run it off a thumb drive or overwrite your Windows installation if you're not using your old Windows, 98 or whatever anymore. If you go to Lakka TV, LAKKA.TV, you'll get the distribution there, and you can turn your old laptop into a pretty, capable retro gaming system. If you get a couple $10, USB game pads, you can plug those in and play your classic arcade games. It's not exactly handheld, but it is, on the go. Set that up, and it's fun for the kids. I'm a fan of the Retroid Pocket systems made by Retroid. They're cheaper than the Ambernicks, and they're decently capable. They run Android, which is kind of cool because if you already have Android emulators on your phone, you can just download them right from the Google Play Store. You can also download and install RetroArch on it, and RetroArch is kind of this big environment for emulators where you can download lots of different emulators, and it's all through the same kind of front end, and it's very customizable, pretty complex, but customizable. So those are fun systems. One thing I haven't personally tried, but some of the younger members of my household have is homebrewing your Nintendo 3DS. So many people have a Nintendo 3DS laying around. They're not coming out with new games for it. They're turning off the eShop on it. So what are you going to do with your Nintendo 3DS? You can, basically jailbreak it and install homebrew software on it so that you can play just about any game on it. Retro games. A lot going on there. And then probably the super sketchy way is if you go on Amazon, there are a number of $10 or $15 retro game systems, 400 games on it. And I have one that I got for $9, and it's called the SUP, the SUP. And it's basically
so what's up?
What's up? And this is not to go on too much of a tangent, but there are these stores popping up where basically merchandise that's returned to Amazon is then sold in bulk to these stores. And then they sell every item for $9 or, drastically reduce things. You kind of take a gamble as to whether or not, this thing was returned because it was broken or somebody just didn't like it. And so for $9, I got a retro game system that plays 400 NES games, and it has, Mario 3 on it, but it also has Mario 14 on it as well. And if you're wondering what Mario 14 is, it's a animated Mario intro that then goes into a Chinese sword action hack 'em and slash 'em up game. So I would not recommend buying a $10 or $20 retro game system off Amazon because the 400 games are going to be questionable legitimacy. There's even questionable content that gets snuck onto these things as well. I've heard. So, but it can be fun just to see what's on them for $9 and
that's funny.
Yeah. So
just don't hand it to your kid.
Yeah. Always preview it first.
Yeah, exactly. And it defaults to being in Chinese, and so they're not really going to read anything too bad on there. So.
Oh, good. Awesome.
Yeah. So it's lots of interesting ways to get into the hobby.
Anything else we want to say? Actually, one other question I want to have is are there downsides or limitations we should be aware of?
I'd say the biggest downside, and this is kind of something that we're coming out of now because the handheld market has really exploded. Like I saw that Asus just announced basically a Steam Deck competitor, and I'm sure it's going to be crazy expensive, but there's a lot more legitimate handhelds that you can buy now. Like with things like Ambernick or Powkitty, like these are mass-produced items made in a Chinese factory, and you can find them sold under like a bunch of different names, and they're getting to the point where they're pretty good, but even up until recently, it was still kind of a crapshoot if you were going to get something that was good or something that was not functional at all. But it's a lot more safe to order one of these things off of Amazon than it used to be. So you're going to get decent hardware.
Yeah, and the other big downside is the legality of playing software that you do not own a license to play, and then finding that, which is again one of the reasons I like the Nintendo Switch or the Evercade, is because that you're doing the right thing. But I mean, right. That said, if I want to play a an obscure arcade game from 1981 that nobody's ever heard of, for research purposes, there are other options.
Right.
For that as well.
We've kind of danced around it, but apart from Evercade and Nintendo Switch and whatever Valve, where do the games themselves, not the hardware but the software, come from? Is that kind of the gray area?
I wouldn't know, Dom.
Yeah.
I wanted to be clear because we're gonna get the questions. Yeah. But yeah.
All I will say is that if you were the kind of person who likes tinkering and getting into this kind of stuff and feels comfortable doing it, you will be able to acquire games, but I'm not going to tell you how to do it on the podcast.
Okay.
I will say that if you do buy things off Amazon, the less reputable companies will include a SD card that may have ROMs on it. You can do the ethical thing and fire it into the sun if you want to.
So the other thing too is if you find original cartridges at yard sales or online, then you own the game. And then there's a gray area over whether that the license includes the ability to move it onto a different technological platform, but that is a gray area legally. So it's not necessarily wrong.
And when you buy into like a curated collection, like the Capcom Stadium or whatever, they're kind of their thing that you can access through your consoles,
right?
eShop or something. You're getting a lot of extras too. You're typically getting concept art, sound test modes, challenges, achievements, and stuff. And it just you don't have to fiddle with things. It just works. And I think for me too, it's just not spending 20 minutes trying to get a game to run before I can actually play it is a big part of the reason why I like these more curated, legitimate, shall we say, experiences. You just you get the game, it works. You can rewind, you can do save states. Most everything has these modern conveniences now, and it's just a much better user experience in my opinion.
So in general, for most people, the Switch with the a Nintendo Archive or the Evercade or Steam Deck, those are probably your best bet. If you're a hacker who likes to dig around in things, you'll figure things out for yourself. Apart from that, but for most people, they'll want to go one of these more legitimate routes, shall we say.
Right. And the biggest downside with the Steam Deck is if you want to stay 100% legitimate with it, is that you're not going to be able to play Nintendo games. But I know Capcom and Sega have a lot of collections of games. Like I think they have like the first 10 Sonic games for $10 on there. And so a lot of other companies do have their retro games on the Steam store already, and they're set up and optimized, and you're not going to be getting either a computer virus by accident or something that's just unplayable.
Right. That's good. I think that's a good way to put that. Then, was there anything else you want to talk about, Jack? You had a link for a video that you wanted to recommend.
Yeah, so I think I recommended this probably years ago on the podcast, but the 8-Bit guy, he's a YouTuber who covers all sorts of retro technology like the Commodore 64 and different things like that. He made this YouTube series where he goes over how old school graphics worked on computers, and he covers like the Commodore systems, the Atari and Nintendo. And it was really fascinating to watch, to see all the different tricks that the developers had to do back in the day because of the limitations of the system, like manipulating sprites, changing the poke registries on the memory to get all these different things working on these games. And for me, that's a lot of the attraction of retro games, is that how creative they had to be to even to get these things work. Like nowadays you can download Unity, and with YouTube tutorials, you can make something that looks pretty awesome. And that's impressive, but I just like the tinkering mindset that these developers had to do and the creativity that went into it.
There was a Netflix series a while back about like the early days of computer games. And you just reminded me of that, and I don't have the at hand, but that was a very interesting and a lot of fun to see. They talked to the original Nintendo guys and the Lord British, one of the original RPG guys. So yeah, that I would seek that sort of stuff out too. The history of the stuff. It is fascinating, these pioneers, how they had to make it work.
Yeah.
How about you, Victor?
Yeah, and if you do have kids who are interested in retro games, congratulations, you're raising them right. But there's a YouTube channel that we've been watching quite a bit recently, the Gaming Historian. And he basically does, 20, 30 minute, not super technical, but just, how did Super Mario World get developed? How did the developers at Nintendo arrive on, creating Yoshi? How did they arrive on the look for the sprites and that sort of thing? And so they're very, very pleasant mini documentaries that you can watch, as a family and stuff. So that very enjoyable.
The Netflix series I was trying to remember was called High Score. There's one or two episodes that were. There was one episode that covered, I think, Leisure Suit Larry's that is not family friendly. Just put it that way.
Yeah.
But there were several other episodes that were really good. So just pre-screen it before you watch it with your kids. Put it that
Al
way.
Jaffe, what are you going to do? Yeah.
So, and then if
Al Jaffe, who was that?
There's a Victor, you had another recommendation for another YouTube channel, just to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah. And it wasn't Al Jaffe. I was thinking of someone else. But yes, Jack mentioned this as well. Retro Game Corps or Core, but it's Retro Game Core is a very good YouTube channel if you're interested in what's this handheld device that I found on Amazon or AliExpress or Banggood. What is it any good? If you watch his videos, he's usually delivers pretty honest reviews on these handhelds. So.
He also has a lot of resources for guides on how to set up different things. Like he has a resource for the Steam Deck and how to set up EmuDeck, and he just walks you through everything. So yeah, I definitely recommend that one too.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, folks, if you have any additional questions or feedback on this particular topic, we'd love to get it from you. We'll bring it up again in a future episode. You can send your feedback to technology@sqpn.com, or come join us on our Discord server where we have great conversations with folks, and that's at sqpn.com/discord. So before we move on, I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of technology, including Rhea B, James D, Daryl F, and Frank L. Their generous tax-deductible donations, mind you, given that April 18th is on its way, are their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of technology and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And just to make it explicit, SQPN is a 501c3 nonprofit, so all your gifts are donations. So let's move on to talk about some headlines. And this is a headline that's kind of related to our feedback today. The headline itself is a popular Instagram, quote unquote, photographer admits his, quote unquote, portraits are generated by AI. This actually is kind of a little similar to last week's story about the Pope in the puffy jacket AI generated image. So this guy has got this Instagram account that has been popular. At the time of this article that Ars Technica did, he had over 26,000 followers, and it was full of all these amazing black and white portraits and photography. And it turns out that all of these images were generated using the Midjourney AI art generator. And then there's a lot of question about, is this deceptive? Is it fake? Is it real art? Is it not? Although, I want to talk about it because when you dig down in the article, in order to generate these images, he doesn't just like put a prompt into Midjourney and then slap that thing onto Instagram. For every image he eventually gets to Instagram, there's like 32 or 40 different images that he photoshops together. So what do you think? I mean, is this deception? Is this art? Is what he's doing bad? Or is he really got using it as a tool, like a paintbrush, to create original art? What do you guys think?
I think, in the words of the great ambassador, Romulan ambassador Vreenak, it's a fake. Call back to my Deep Space Nine. Yeah. No, I'm just shocked that anybody on Instagram would portray something that wasn't completely 100% authentic. I mean, we've been heading down this road for so long where take a photo and then it gets airbrushed, Photoshop. Photoshop itself has AI, things in it now to detect, blemishes and remove them. Any portrait of anybody, unless you took it yourself, has been touched up. So this is just coming at it from the other side. Instead of, real people with fake, processing, now we have fake people with, real processing. So it is what it is. Yeah.
My opinion is that he should have been more upfront about his process, but he is doing more work than 99% of the other influencers on Instagram, because he's actually taking the time to create artistic prompts. It's hard to get good images out of AI still. You have to work on your prompts to get them to where you want them, and then putting in the time to Photoshop it. My only issue is that he kind of fudged it and made it seem like he was just taking these pictures.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think it's pretty cool. They're cool looking pictures. So
yeah.
Well,
speaking of the prompt, I was reading about prompt engineers are a new thing where these companies are hiring people to write prompts for use with these AIs, and they're paying them 6 figures, and they're hiring English majors and philosophy majors out of college. And I'm like, this is the first time an English major made 6 figures out of college in ever.
For about 3 months until they train the AI how to write the prompts. It's not sustainable.
I've actually been doing that. There's a AI art app that I like to use called Starry AI. And I've been experimenting with it. It gets really good pictures, so it's fun to write very descriptive literary prompts and sees what it gives you. But I've also been doing this thing where I'll put in junk data into it to see what it gives me. And it seems that the default for it, if you don't put in anything that it can really take, is a young Asian woman in her in a city in a jean jacket. If you just put in random stuff, that is what it will give you.
It's almost like the base default that it starts with and then goes from there to create whatever the image is. That kind of,
it was the developer's fiance, how she looked the night she died, and how
it's the soul of the AI trapped in there. But I've also been asking ChatGPT for prompts to put into the AI thing, and then seeing what it gives me, and that's been fun, just to kind of go back and forth with those two.
Oh wow. That would be useful.
I've been asking ChatGPT to give me ASCII art of different things. You say, draw an ASCII art of a fish, and then it gives you this really weird thing.
I've been asking to give me SEO, meta description summaries of things, for podcasts and stuff, which is really useful. As far as this guy goes, it's how different is what he's doing, where he's combining a bunch of AI art from just what your phone is already doing, which is computational photography, taking raw data and building an image out of it. There's a similar, it's not the same thing. I know, but it's not also completely unconnected, and that's kind of an interesting. I agree with you, Jack. It's the fact that he wasn't upfront about what he was doing. That's the problem, not so much that he was doing it.
Speaking of computational photography, I have a Google Pixel, and it does a lot of that computational photography, and usually it's really good. But the other day I took a picture of a squirrel, and it really glitched out, and the squirrel looks like it's made out of like watercolor brushes. I'll post it in the Secrets of Tech Discord.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to see it, they can go over there. But it was interesting to see the machine like break on a real photo.
Wow, that is wild. Yeah, I'm curious. That make watercolors. Interesting. All right, so our next headline is this is me being aspirational. The headline is the Lightship L1 is a caravan, which is British for camping trailer, built for EVs that can also power your home. So this is a very expensive rich person's toy at this point. That is a self-propelled camping trailer that comes with a giant battery in it that you can take camping. So it sleeps up to 6. It costs over $100,000. Well, they say well over 100. I think it's
going to cost way more than 100.
It's like 150.
Although it comes out, well, it's going to
To be fair, some of the big RVs this is within that range. So that's not,
big RVs are in the hundreds of like $1 million
right.
Range.
They can get up there. Yeah. My brother's got one of those big bus RV things, and it's something else. He's a truck driver. So the Lightship L1, it's a trailer. It's like a pop-up trailer. So it's 6 feet tall, 6'9". I think they said when it's down, it can pop up to 10 feet. It's 20 something feet long, and it's full of batteries. And in certain configurations, it can charge the electric vehicle pulling it, or it also has its own motors in its wheel, so it can take some of the load off of the vehicle pulling it, whether it's a internal combustion engine vehicle or not. You can even park it in your driveway and power your house from it. And they said that the battery will last for up to a week in the wilderness without having to be parsimonious about usage, like, for using the various appliances and conveniences in it. And in fact, and then you can also get it with solar panels on top, so you can keep charging it. It's kind of wild to look at. I mean, this is impractical, frankly. I mean, it's all glass, and it's not like the sort of camper you see at your regular state park campground. This is high end, fancy. But what do you think? I mean, is this where we're going? I kind of like the idea.
I like the idea.
Yeah, it's really cool, but I've got to be honest, I don't like the completely smooth, low poly look of electric vehicles. Like, I want an electric truck that looks like an old Ford truck from the 50s. That'd be awesome.
I agree. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of that. I am less enamored of the Cybertruck than some people are. I like, that's a similar thing.
Yeah.
That is definitely a low poly vehicle. I like that, the description. Yeah, I mean, if this looked like an Airstream, a classic Airstream, I would totally be for all for it. But I like the idea that, I mean, when my family camps, we're tent campers. I work for a Catholic nonprofit. I can't afford a camper, so we go tent camping. But when I was a kid, we had a camping trailer, and we did this sort of camping. And yeah, I love the idea of having this extending the whole electric vehicle idea to an auxiliary vehicle that helps power the primary vehicle. You know what I mean? Like they work together, and I like that idea that they work together to accomplish the goal. And it kind of compensates for some of the shortcomings currently that electric vehicles have, like range. It can add a lot of range. So I kind of like this idea.
I think this would be great if you were either single or empty nesters. Get this in a Tesla and then just be a nomad.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
That's a great idea. Yeah, if you get that sort of retiree that just drives around. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I like the idea. I like that you could just set it up with the solar panels in someplace sunny, and keep it away from the campfire, I guess, would be my only recommendation there. But I like the idea. I like the concept of it. We'll see where it goes with this. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that this particular one is. I mean, they could be a Tesla, you know what I mean, where they've come in and disrupted everything and they've become a leader. I think it's a leader, not the leader, but they become a big enough force that they're here to stay. I think it's likely that they come and prove the concept, and then Winnebago and the Airstream actually make the practical one that everybody uses. I think it's just as likely.
At which point it will cost $500,000 or $600,000. Yeah.
Right. That's right. So our last headline is one. This is a bit of a cautionary tale. Zombie newspaper sites rise from the grave. We should have had this in October. So what happens when a local newspaper, like small community newspaper, goes under, which a lot of them do, and they cease to exist, they stop publishing. Their domains, it turns out, are being snapped up by these troll link farms, SEO farms, basically, usually entrepreneurs somewhere in Eastern Europe often, or in Asia sometimes, or in South America, who snap them up and turn them into these link bait sites where they have fake news articles or just generic articles that are designed to basically get people click on the links from Google, from a Google search, and then show them ads. That's what it's ad bait, right? And what you get is they're existing off of the reputation of these small newspapers that used to exist and had a connection in a small town, and now they're kind of living off of that. I have to admit, I've seen people sharing stupid fake articles from these things as if they were real, because it's a real newspaper. Not anymore. What do you guys think?
I think this explains why the Google News feed on the Android phones is such garbage, because my feed is full of stuff like this, and it'll be like the Minneapolis Star Herald, and there'll be some article about something totally random. Like, why am I getting this? I don't
try these crazy uses for olive oil. Yeah,
yeah,
right. Or the one they like 10 most popular Bitcoin casino games. Ooh, let me open that one up.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's an issue, and I mean, is there anything we can do about it, or is it just be aware?
I think this ties back to our feedback. The listener feedback at the beginning of the show. It's don't believe what you see online, and really at this point, if you're not using like a very curated news feed where you're just getting information that you know is from a reputable source, then you're going to get bombarded with all sorts of clickbait.
One thing I worry about is personal websites. Like, I have a personal website. I've had it for 20 years now. And someday I won't be around my kids aren't going to want to pay whatever the ridiculous hosting fees I'm paying to keep the archive going every year. What's going to happen to that site? Will someone snap it up and, without barely changing anything, keeping my header on it and my name on it, and start shoveling dangerous clickbait under my name? It's a scary proposition.
I don't know. I kind of want to hear your opinion on putting onions in your socks.
Yeah. Actually, I have a blog post on that. I'll get you the link.
Yeah, I mean, I think the credibility of online news sites and just our news media in general was in question long before these, rogue entrepreneurs came along. If they're hastening people's, mistrust in the media, I might say, like, more power to them.
Right.
At this point. But yeah, so no, I mean, these people have found a way to they're not doing anything illegal. I don't think so. They're just buying old domains and putting their own websites on it. So, just, buyer beware. And yeah, I mean, if you everybody has the news sites they like and that they trust, and maybe they reflect reality 50%. So
what gets me is the bigger news sites, because a lot of times the bigger news media will mine smaller news media for stories, And when they pass some of this stuff along, especially across language and cultural barriers, so like you'll sometimes, there was a story I saw once where it was this news site in India was repeating a story from a Boston newspaper, which didn't exist, about this Catholic priest who was claiming that he had a vision and saw that God was a woman. And it was like, and I worked for the Archdiocese of Boston. I know how to, who the priest, this priest didn't exist, that parish didn't exist, the newspaper didn't exist, but yet this site had passed it on, and then that was being passed around as legitimate news. And that's what it like is scary to me, is like, if something like the New York Times, the LA Times, or, the whatever picks this stuff up and passes it along, so the media have got to be doing a better job of vetting their stories too.
Yeah. I mean, it's the media's confirmation bias at a certain point, right? They wouldn't pass along something that didn't already meet their biases or their worldview. So, it's probably just as accurate as anything else that they would report,
right
at that point. So
yeah.
Buyer beware, if you must get your news online, get it from a, variety of sources to, kind of triangulate, as best you can what the actual story might be.
Yep.
I was gonna say I'm a millennial, so I just get my news from Reddit.
There you go. Very reliable. All right, so let's move on to our picks of the week. Jack, you're up first. What's your pick this week?
My pick of the week touches on the retro theme that we were going on. It's the JSO, I think it's JSO, maybe JSOX, transparent backplate for the Steam Deck. And it kind of goes with what you're saying about Valve's kind of open source attitude towards things. It's a backplate for the Steam Deck that comes in all sorts of fun colors, and I got the atomic purple, of course, because that is the pinnacle of translucent electronic design. And it's really easy to install if you're at all okay with opening up your electronics. It took me like 5 minutes. You just unscrew the back, put the new one on, and it's good to go. And it doesn't add any sort of practical functionality at all to the device, but now you can see the internals and it looks cool. So it's only $30 on Amazon, and it's a fun project if you want to customize your Steam Deck, because they only come in black by default.
So it kind of reminds me a little bit back of the old iMacs, where you could see, the translucent colored shell through the back. That's fun. I wish they made phones with the iPhones, which you could see the interior, like they could get the translucent. That would be nice. Anyway.
That would be a hit, I think.
Yeah. A lot of us would buy them. So cool. Victor, what's your pick this week?
Yeah, also keeping with the theme, and just making me realize how old I am. One of my favorite games that I played, and it didn't seem that long ago, was Metroid Prime on the GameCube, and then later released on the Wii. And it's the Metroid, the classic Nintendo game where you play bounty hunter Samus Aran, and you fight these little aliens called Metroids and space pirates. But what they did for the GameCube is they made it a first-person kind of exploration game, and it was really revolutionary and groundbreaking at the time. And Nintendo has just re-released it as Metroid Prime Remastered for the Nintendo Switch, and they've updated the graphics, kept the game exactly the same, but updated the graphics, modernized the controls so it's a little bit more accessible and easy to play. And I've just been, even though I haven't played the game in 20 years, going back in and just revisiting all these locations, and it's just amazing the way memory works. You're like, oh yeah, there was a secret behind this particular wall right here. Let's see if I can get that. But it's also kind of a wake up call for me that these games are now retro, that I enjoyed. It didn't seem like that long ago, but yeah, 20 years have gone by. But it's very fun if you played the original and want to dive back in. It's way more enjoyable with the updated controls. And that's another thing too, is I've tried to play it in emulators over the years, and I've been very frustrated with the controls, the lag, graphics glitches. Just having an official version I can just plug into my Switch and pick up and play whenever I want to has been really nice.
So my pick this week is this really cool, yet another product from Anker, which makes these great bits of hardware. And they make a lot of different chargers and battery packs. And this one is kind of both. It's a hybrid. It's the Anker 733 power bank, and it's a gallium arsenide battery pack. So it has 2 USB-C ports and a USB-A port, and you can plug things in. It'll do high-speed charging. It's a 65-watt charger, but it also does 30-watt USB-C. And what it does is, so it's a power bank, but it also has plug prongs on it, so you can plug it directly into the wall. Now, you can do that to charge it, of course, but you can plug it into the wall and then plug, say, your laptop into it and power the laptop from it like you would with the pack that came with the computer. So it kind of replaces that. So the benefit here is you've got a big 10,000 milliamp hour power bank with you can charge up to 3 things in it, and you can charge high speed. And it also replaces the charger that came with your computer so that you don't have to carry that around too. And so it'll do 65 watt. It's not a 100-watt charger. I like that I wish it would had 100-watt just for that extra bit. But it'll do 65, which is enough to power up, charge up a MacBook while using it, which is sufficient.
So it's kind of like the light ship, except for your MacBook.
Yeah.
There you go. It'll charge the primary. Yeah.
And if you are upset about no 100-watt version, you can take that up with Anchor Management.
Yes, let them know. Yeah, they may make one.
Right.
So, and this is $100. This one, the 733. So it's been really good. I've been using it for about 4 or 5 months now, and I take it with me wherever I go, whether I'm just taking my iPad or my laptop. It's been really great. And
it's allowed on flights, they say on the facts. So
yes,
there you go.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. I would expect that most battery packs these days they gotta design them so they can be taken on airplanes. I mean, you couldn't sell one and say, oh, but don't take it on a plane. That would be disastrous. Oh man. All right, so that does it for our picks of the week, and I'll do it for our show. We'd love to hear what you thought of anything we discussed today. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/technology or the StarQuest Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to technology@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. You'll find links from everything we discussed today and our picks of the week on our show notes at starquest.fm/TEC206, Tech206. Follow The Secrets of Tech in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at the StarQuest YouTube channel, where you should also make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. Until next time, Jack Baruzzini, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of technology.
Thanks, Dom.
Victor Lambs, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Technology on StarQuest.